It was a typical Thursday afternoon at Westfield Middle School. The sun was high, casting golden rays across the soccer field where kids were laughing, running, and shouting. Just another ordinary day in suburban America. The air smelled like freshly cut grass, and the faint sound of sneakers squeaking against asphalt echoed from the basketball court. But in the middle of that carefree chaos, one bark shattered the entire scene. Sharp, sudden, urgent. Rex, the K9 German Shepherd visiting for the school's Hero Dogs program, wasn't supposed to bark. Trained for discipline, Rex only barked when something was wrong. The bark cut through the chatter like a siren. Heads turned. The buzz of preteen voices dropped into a low hum of confusion. Teachers exchanged puzzled looks. The police officer holding Rex's leash stiffened, gripping tighter, scanning the crowd. And then, like a slow motion scene unfolding in a movie, Rex's eyes locked onto a boy standing in the shade of the oak trees. That boy was Parker Evans, a 7th grader known for his pranks and easy charm. His grin faded the moment Rex took a step toward him, tail low, body tense, ears pinned forward like a missile locked onto a target. Parker's hands were trembling, barely noticeable at first. Then everyone saw it. His fingers clutched a corner of a blue plaid skirt, twisted tight like a secret, and standing in front of him, frozen in place, was Emily Carter. Emily, the quiet girl with freckles across her nose, the one who always sat alone in the lunchroom, who hugged her books like they were shields. She wasn't saying a word, just staring at Parker with wide, tear-filled eyes. Rex barked again, this time louder, sharper. A warning. And that's when time seemed to stop. Westfield had always felt safe. This was America after all, the land of dreams, of rules, of fairness. But in that moment, it became clear that safety is fragile, and heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear fur. Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Please stop. Her words floated on the wind, almost lost in the noise. The officer holding Rex tugged on the leash, trying to pull him back, but the dog wouldn't budge. His body was a statue of focus, muscles tight, eyes burning into Parker's soul. It wasn't aggression. It was protection. And Parker, he let go. The skirt slipped from his fingers, crumpling softly. He stepped back, hands raised. But it wasn't over yet because Rex wasn't done. He let out a low growl, a sound that rumbled like distant thunder, not of violence, but of warning. A sound that said, I see what you did, and it's not okay. The teachers scrambled. One rushed to Emily, checking if she was all right, while another tried to calm Parker, who now stood pale as a sheet, avoiding everyone's gaze. Amid the chaos, a small group of students gathered, whispering, confused, and wide-eyed. No one had seen exactly what happened, but everyone felt it. The invisible line that had been crossed, and the unspoken rule that you don't mess with someone who can't fight back. And there, in the middle of it all, stood Rex, his chest rising and falling, ears still alert. The hero no one expected, but exactly the one Emily needed. Hey, if stories like this resonate with you, where animals stand up for what's right and remind us what courage really looks like, take a moment to subscribe to Heroes for Animals on YouTube. We bring you the most incredible true stories of animals who save lives, change hearts, and teach us what it means to be human. Don't miss the next chapter in this journey. Click that subscribe button and join the community of animal lovers and heroes. As the principal arrived, the situation seemed to settle on the surface at least. Parker muttered something that no one quite heard, eyes fixed on the ground. Emily was led away by a teacher, her small frame shaking slightly, but her hand paused to gently touch Rex's fur, a silent thank you that didn't need words. The whispers started to spread across the courtyard. Why did Rex bark like that? Did Parker really? Was it just a prank? Or was it more? But the truth, that would take time to surface. Rex, however, already knew. And in the quiet that followed, as the kids slowly drifted back to their games, and the adults tried to restore order, one thing lingered in the air. Sometimes it takes a bark to wake us up. The courtyard buzzed with a nervous energy. Kids drifted back to their games. But something had changed. Even the wind felt different, carrying whispers of what had just happened. It wasn't just about Parker, Emily, or even Rex. It was about a line that got crossed, a line everyone knew was there, but no one ever really talked about. Parker sat on a bench near the principal's office, his head in his hands, his cheeks burned, and he could feel the stares. Every laugh, every glance, every whisper, it all felt like it was aimed straight at him. It was just a joke, wasn't it? He replayed the moment over and over, grabbing Emily's skirt, yanking it, expecting her to squeal or maybe laugh nervously like kids sometimes do. But Emily didn't laugh. She froze, her eyes wide, her mouth a thin, tight line of fear. That look, that was what hit Parker like a punch in the gut. And then the bark. That bark. It still rang in his ears, cutting deeper than any words ever could. Inside the front office, Emily sat quietly, her small hands folded in her lap. A school counselor, Mrs. Jenkins, knelt beside her. "Honey, can you tell me what happened out there?" she asked gently, her voice soft, practiced. Emily shrugged, staring down at her sneakers. They were scuffed from recess, laces untied like always. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Don't know. He just pulled." The counselor's heart sank. It wasn't the first time she'd heard something like this, but it didn't make it any easier. She glanced toward the door where Officer Daniels stood with Rex still alert. Daniels rubbed the back of his neck, his brow furrowed. He knew Rex. He trusted Rex. That dog didn't bark for no reason. Outside, a small crowd lingered. Middle schoolers pretending to shoot hoops while keeping one eye on the office. Some tossing a soccer ball half-heartedly. The story was spreading like wildfire. "Dude." Parker grabbed Emily's skirt and the dog went nuts. "No way." Rex barked like someone was breaking in or something. I heard Emily almost cried. It wasn't long before phones buzzed, texts zipped across, friend groups. Parker's name was on everyone's lips. In the middle of the chatter, Tyler, Parker's best friend, leaned against a tree, arms crossed, his jaw clenched. He didn't say a word. Tyler knew Parker wasn't a bad kid, but he also knew Parker liked to push boundaries, test limits. He also knew Emily, how shy she was, how she barely spoke in class. Man, what was he thinking? Tyler muttered under his breath. Not to anyone in particular. Rex lay by Officer Daniels' side, calm now, but his eyes never left the office window. His ears flicked at every sound, every movement, as if waiting for a signal. Daniels gave Rex a scratch behind the ears. "You knew, didn't you, boy?" He whispered, a mix of pride and curiosity in his voice. Rex thumped his tail once, a soft beat. against the floor. It wasn't just about training. Dogs like Rex, real canines. They read more than just actions. They smelled fear, heard heartbeats spike, sensed the unspoken. And Rex had sensed something in Parker that no one else had, not even the teachers. Later that afternoon, Principal Miller called Parker into his office. The walls were lined with certificates, a photo of Miller shaking hands with the mayor, and a giant whiteboard covered in sticky notes. Miller folded his hands on the desk, looking at Parker with a mix of concern and disappointment. "Parker, do you understand why we're having this conversation?" Parker nodded, but his voice caught in his throat. He managed a small hoarse, "Yeah, tell me in your own words." Parker stared at his shoes. "I was just messing around. I didn't mean to. I didn't think it would be a big deal." Miller leaned back in his chair, sighing. "That's the thing, Parker. You didn't think, and because of that, someone got hurt." Parker's shoulder slumped. The weight of the words, "someone got hurt," hit harder than he expected. "I'm sorry," he muttered, but it felt thin, weak, like it wasn't enough. Meanwhile, Emily sat in the counselor's office, tracing circles on a sheet of paper. Mrs. Jenkins gently asked if she wanted to talk to her parents or go home early, but Emily shook her head. She wasn't ready to talk to her parents. Not yet. Her eyes drifted to the window, where she could see Rex sitting outside, his ears perked, watching like a silent guardian. For the first time that day, Emily smiled. A small, fleeting smile, but a smile nonetheless. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the school emptied out, a few teachers stayed behind, talking in hushed voices about what happened. "It's crazy how that dog just knew," one of them said. Officer Daniels nodded. "Rex isn't just a dog. He's family, and he's been trained to spot signs of distress. Kids don't always speak up, but dogs like Rex, they listen in ways we can't." It wasn't just about what Parker did. It was about what Rex saw. The tension in Emily's body, the subtle flinch when Parker's hand moved, the look in her eyes, the unspoken fear. Parker's mom picked him up, her face tight with worry. They drove home in silence, the radio off, the air heavy. When they pulled into the driveway, she finally spoke. "Parker, we're going to talk about this. You can't just brush it off." He didn't argue. For the first time in a long while, Parker felt small. And maybe that was the lesson. At home, Emily sat on her bed holding her stuffed bunny. Her phone buzzed with messages. Some from kids asking if she was okay. Others just gossiping. She turned it off and set it aside. Her mom knocked on the door, a gentle voice. "Sweetheart, you want to talk?" Emily hesitated. Then she said, "No, Mom. I'm okay. I think I'm okay." And as she lay down, her mind replayed the moment over and over. The bark, the stars, the heat rushing to her cheeks. But more than that, she remembered the look in Rex's eyes, like he was telling her, "I've got your back." Tomorrow would be another day, another chance to move forward. But for Parker, for Emily, and for Rex, the story wasn't over yet. Because some lessons, the hard ones, don't end in a single day. They stick, they grow, they shape who you become. And sometimes it takes a dog to teach a kid what it means to be decent. The morning after the incident, the air at Westfield Middle School felt heavy, like a storm cloud had settled over the building. Even the birds seemed quieter. Kids shuffled into their home rooms with half-hearted greetings, and teachers exchanged glances that said, more than words ever could. Parker sat at his desk, eyes fixed on a chipped spot in the wood, his stomach twisted in knots. He could feel the whispers starting before the bell even rang, murmurs that prickled at the back of his neck, words like creep and pervert thrown around in hushed voices. Every laugh felt like it was about him, even when it wasn't. Emily hadn't come to school that day. Her absence spoke louder than any accusation. And Rex wasn't in the classroom either. But somehow it felt like his presence still lingered, like a quiet reminder that someone had been watching. At lunch, Parker picked at his food, pushing mashed potatoes across the tray. Tyler slid into the seat across from him, folding his arms with a frown. "Dude, what were you thinking?" Tyler's voice was low, serious, not the usual joking tone they shared. Parker shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "It was just a joke. I didn't mean anything by it." Tyler leaned in. "Yeah, well, nobody's laughing, man. Especially not Emily." Parker clenched his jaw, the guilt bubbling up in his chest like a soda can, ready to explode. "I get it. Okay, I messed up." His voice cracked, barely holding it together. But did he really get it? Across town, Emily sat on her porch steps, the sun warming her face. Her mom sat beside her, sipping coffee, watching her daughter stare off into the yard where a pair of squirrels chased each other up a tree. "You don't have to go back tomorrow if you're not ready," her mom said softly. Emily hugged her, knees tighter. "I'll go," she whispered. I don't want them to think I'm weak." Her mom placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not weak, honey. What happened wasn't your fault, and standing up for yourself doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong." Emily nodded, but the words felt heavy. What stuck with her the most wasn't what Parker had done. It was the way no one else had stopped it, except Rex. That bark, sharp, fierce, protective, had cut through the moment like a sword. It had told her she wasn't alone, even when no one else seemed to notice. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels sat at his desk at the precinct, scrolling through reports, but his mind wasn't on paperwork. It was on Rex. The dog lay at his feet, calm but alert, as if still on duty. Daniels glanced down and shook his head with a small smile. "You're something else, buddy," he muttered. Rex thumped his tail once in response. Daniels leaned back in his chair, thinking about how dogs could sense what humans couldn't or wouldn't. He thought about all the times they'd been on patrol, how Rex had picked up on tension, fear, and even guilt before. Daniel's head. Maybe it wasn't just about training. Maybe it was something deeper, something instinctual. That afternoon, Principal Miller called a staff meeting. The teachers gathered in the library, some holding notepads, others just folding their arms, waiting. "Look," Miller began. "I know what happened yesterday shook everyone up, and I know some of you are wondering if we're overreacting, but the truth is we have a responsibility to our students, to each other, to this community. This isn't just about Parker or Emily. It's about creating a safe space for all of our kids." He paused, looking around the room. "And Rex, he's part of that effort. I know. He's a dog, but he's also a teacher in his own way. He saw something we didn't. That's a lesson for all of us." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling in. Back in the classroom, Parker sat through math, barely hearing the teacher's voice. His mind was on Emily, how she'd looked so small, so scared, and Rex standing there like a wall between them. He couldn't shake the image, the growl, the bark, the way the entire school seemed to stop in its tracks. Was it really just a joke? That question gnawed at him. The more he thought about it, the more he realized it wasn't. Not for Emily and not for himself either. After school, Parker's mom drove him home in silence. He stared out the window, watching the world blur past until they pulled into the driveway. "Parker," his mom said, turning off the engine. "You need to fix this." He swallowed hard. "Oh, you'll figure it out. But you can't just sit in the guilt. That's not how you make things right." Her words hung in the air, like a challenge. That evening, Parker sat at his desk, staring at a blank sheet of paper. After what felt like forever, he picked up his pen and started to write. The next day, Emily walked into school, her heart racing. She could feel the stares, but she kept her head high, shoulders back, clutching her books like armor. As she walked past the main entrance, she stopped. There, taped to the wall, was a note. "To Emily, I'm sorry. I didn't understand before. I promised to be better." Signed, simply, Parker. Beside the note, a small, hand-drawn sketch of a dog, Rex, watching over a little girl with a quiet strength. Emily's eyes filled with tears. But this time, they weren't tears of fear. They were something else. Looked around, and there across the hallway stood Parker. He didn't say a word, just a small nod, a silent apology. And there too was Rex, sitting calmly by Officer Daniel's side, watching, waiting, the quiet hero who had seen it all. In life, sometimes the hardest lessons come in the smallest moments. Bark, a growl, a note left on a wall. Sometimes it takes a dog to remind us what it means to truly see each other. The next week at Westfield Middle School felt different, like a ripple of change had swept through the halls. The usual chatter and noise still filled the air. Kids talking about their favorite YouTubers, upcoming soccer games, and who might ask who to the school dance. But there was an undercurrent of something else. It was the kind of shift that wasn't easy to put into words, but you could feel it in the glances exchanged, in the way kids gave each other just a little more space in the hallways, and in the whispers that had started to fade into quiet. Parker felt it the most. He sat in his usual spot in the cafeteria, but Tyler wasn't sitting with him. Neither were the other kids, who usually laughed at his jokes or tossed a soccer ball his way. They weren't being mean, just distant, like they didn't know how to act around him anymore. Parker couldn't blame them. He poked at his lunch, not really hungry, and stared at the note he'd written the week before. He wasn't sure if it had helped, but at least Emily had read it. Across the cafeteria, he saw Emily, sitting with a small group of girls. Still looked a little nervous, her eyes darting around like she wasn't sure she belonged there. But then he saw something that stopped him. One of the girls leaned over and whispered something to her, and Emily smiled. Real smile. It was small, but it was real. That afternoon during study hall, Principal Miller made an announcement over the loudspeaker. "Attention, students. Next week we'll be holding a special assembly in the gym. Officer Daniels and his K-9 partner Rex will be leading a talk on respect, responsibility, and how we can all work together to make Westfield a safe space for everyone. We encourage everyone to attend." There was a small pause, then a softer, almost thoughtful tone in Miller's voice. "Let's take this opportunity to learn, to grow, and to remember that sometimes it takes courage to make things right." Parker sat back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The words sinking in like a weight. A home. That night, Parker's mom called him into the living room. She had her arms crossed, but her eyes were kind. "I heard about the assembly," she said. "You going to be there?" Parker nodded. Slowly. "Yeah, I think I should." Nodded, then sat down next to him on the couch. "You know," she said, "it's not the mistake that defines you. It's what you do after. That's what people remember." Parker stared at the floor, taking that in. His mom had a way of saying things that stuck even when he didn't want them to. The day of the assembly arrived, and the gym was packed. The bleachers were full, and the buzz of voices echoed off the high ceilings. Some kids whispered excitedly about seeing Rex again. Others rolled their eyes, thinking it would be another boring talk. But when Officer Daniels stepped onto the court with Rex trotting beside him, the room hushed. Daniels held the mic, smiling warmly. "Good morning, Westfield." He nodded toward Rex, who sat obediently at his side. "I know you've seen Rex around before, but today I want to talk about something different. I want to talk about what it means to be a protector, not just as a police officer or as a dog trained to keep people safe, but as a person, as a friend, as a classmate." He paused, letting that settle. Daniel shared stories about times Rex had stepped in to de-escalate fights, about how dogs can sense emotions, fear, and danger even before humans do. He explained how respect isn't just about rules. It's about empathy, about paying attention to the people around you and knowing when someone might need help, even if they don't say it out loud. And then he looked out into the crowd and said, "Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to stand up, not just for yourself but for someone else. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to admit when you're wrong." Parker felt those words hit like a punch to the chest. He shifted uncomfortably, knowing Daniels wasn't calling him out by name, but also knowing the message was for him just as much as for anyone else. After the assembly, students buzzed with a mix of excitement and thoughtfulness. "Rex is such a good dog," someone whispered. "I didn't know they could tell when people are scared like that." "Do you think I'd be brave enough to stand up for someone else?" That last question lingered, floating between conversations, like a quiet challenge. Parker hung back after the crowd started to leave. He saw Daniels kneeling to give Rex a scratch behind the ears, smiling as the dog licked his hand. "Hey, Officer Daniels." Parker's voice was hesitant, almost a whisper. Daniels turned, his expression calm and open. "Hey there, Parker. What's up?" Parker swallowed hard. I wanted to say thanks for Rex, for what he did." Daniels nodded, slowly, giving Parker a look that said, "I see you. Rex just did what he's trained to do," he said gently. "But you've got a choice, too, Parker. What you do next, that's on you." Parker nodded, the weight of those words settling into his chest like a stone. Later that day, Parker saw Emily at her locker. He took a breath, walked up, and stood there awkwardly for a second. "Hey, Emily," she turned, her eyes cautious, but curious. I wanted to say sorry again. I know I already did, but I'm still sorry. I wasn't thinking. It wasn't okay." Emily's shoulders tensed for a moment, then she let out a breath. She nodded, not smiling, but not frowning either. "Okay," she said quietly. "It wasn't a full forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start." That night, Parker sat in bed, staring at the ceiling. He thought about how small actions ripple out, how a joke can turn into something bigger, how a bark can change everything. And he thought about Rex, the dog who saw what no one else saw, the one who stood between right and wrong when no one else did. Parker didn't know exactly how to fix everything, but he knew one thing for sure. He wanted to try. The week rolled on, and while the whispers had started to die down, the weight of what happened lingered like a stubborn shadow. It wasn't just Parker's shadow. It was the whole school's. There were moments when everything felt normal again. The bell ringing between classes, kids rushing to finish homework at the last minute, jokes flying across the lunch tables, but then someone would glance at Emily a little too long, or Parker would catch the tail end of a conversation that stopped when he walked by and the weight came back. The thing about mistakes, real mistakes, is that they don't just go away, they stick. And for Parker it was starting to feel like no matter what he did, he'd never shake this one off. One afternoon, after school let out, Parker lingered in the courtyard, kicking a rock across the concrete, not ready to go home. He didn't want to face his mom's quiet disappointment or his dad's stiff silence. That's when he heard the sound of paws on pavement. Rex's paws. He looked up to see Officer Daniels walking across the courtyard, Rex trotting beside him, tail wagging lazily. Daniel spotted Parker and gave a small nod. "Hey, kid." Parker shoved his hands in his hoodie pocket. "Hey." Daniel stopped, looking at him for a long moment. Then he tilted his head toward a nearby bench. "Mind if I sit?" Parker shrugged. "Sure." They sat in silence for a bit, the afternoon sun casting long shadows on the ground. Rex lay down between them, resting his chin on his paws, his eyes half closed but still alert. In that way only dogs could be. Finally, Daniel spoke. "You know, when I first started working with Rex, I thought it was all about commands. Sit, stay, search. But I learned pretty quick that it's more than that." Parker glanced sideways, curious despite himself. Daniels continued. "It's about trust, about reading the signs, body language, tone of voice, the stuff people try to hide. Rex sees what most of us miss, because he's not distracted by the noise." He leaned back, looking up at the fire. That day in the courtyard, Rex wasn't just reacting to what you did. He was reacting to what Emily felt. Parker's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, but the words felt too heavy, too big. Daniel seemed to sense that and added quietly, "I know you didn't mean for things to get as bad as they did, but sometimes meaning well isn't enough." Parker swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his eyes. "I want to make it right," he said. Finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniels nodded slowly. "That's a good place to start." Later that evening, Parker sat at the kitchen table staring at a blank sheet of paper. His mom was cooking dinner, the smell of garlic and butter filling the room. "Mom," he asked quietly. She turned, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Yeah, honey, can you help me with something?" Her face softened. "Of course. What is it?" Parker took a deep breath. "I want to write a letter to Emily." His mom nodded, pulling up a chair beside him. They sat together, Parker writing his mom helping him find the right words. When he got stuck, it wasn't perfect and it didn't fix everything, but it was honest, and sometimes that's what mattered most. The next day, Parker walked into school with a letter folded neatly in his pocket heart hammering in his chest. He spotted Emily by her locker, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, a book hugged tightly to her chest. He hesitated for a second, then took a step forward. "Hey, Emily," he said softly. She turned her eyes wary. "I wrote this for you." He held out the letter, his hands shaking just a little. Emily looked at it for a moment before taking it carefully, like it might break if she wasn't gentle. "Thanks," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Parker nodded, not trusting himself to say more. Later that day during gym class, the PE teacher, Coach Martinez, surprised everyone by announcing a teamwork challenge day. "Pair up," he called, blowing his whistle. Parker's stomach dropped as he realized most kids already had partners. He glanced around, feeling that familiar sting of isolation. But then, to his surprise, Emily stepped forward, holding up the letter. "I'll pair with Parker," she said, her voice steady but quiet. A few heads turned and whispers started, but Coach Martinez just nodded. "All right, let's see what you two can do," he said. The challenge was simple. An obstacle course requiring trust, spotting each other, holding the rope steady, communicating clearly. At first it was awkward. Parker was nervous and Emily was quiet. But as they moved through the course, something shifted. Parker found himself watching Emily's face, picking up on her cues. She wasn't just shy, she was careful, observant, and Emily started noticing Parker's effort, how he was trying, really trying to listen, to help, to make up for what he'd done. By the end of the course, when they crossed the finish line, they were both breathless and smiling. Not a big smile, not the kind that erases everything, but a smile that said, "Okay, we're not there yet, but we're trying." As they left the gym, Parker glanced over at Emily. "Thanks for partnering with me." Emily shrugged, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You're welcome." And behind them, standing quietly by the doors, was Rex, watching, always watching. That night, Parker lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the day, about how hard it was to make things right, about how much work it still took. But also, for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was on the right path. And he knew one thing for sure. Sometimes being a protector isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about stepping up when it matters, even if you messed up before. A few weeks had passed since the day Parker handed Emily that letter. The seasons were starting to shift, the air crisper. In the mornings, the leaves turning the first hints of golden red. Fall was in the air, and with it came a quiet sense of change at Westfield Middle School. Things didn't magically go back to the way they were. Parker wasn't the class clown anymore. And Emily still kept to herself, though. She didn't hunch her shoulders as much when she walked down the halls. But something had shifted between them and, maybe even in the whole school. The Hero Dogs program had left an impression that ran deeper than most school events. Kids still talked about Rex, about how he'd barked that day in the courtyard, how he'd seen what no one else had. There were new conversations happening now about respect, about looking out for each other, about doing the right thing even when it's hard. One afternoon, Parker was helping in the library as part of a school service project, something he'd volunteered for, hoping to make amends in small ways. He was sorting books onto shelves when he saw Emily across the room flipping through a book on animals. Gathering his courage, he walked over. "Hey," he said, voice soft. Emily looked up a little surprised, but she didn't flinch. Hey, Parker glanced at the cover. You like dogs, huh? Nodded. Yeah, especially the smart ones. Like Rex. Parker smiled a little, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, he's pretty amazing. There was a pause, and for the first time, it didn't feel awkward. It felt like maybe a new beginning. Hey, Emily, Parker said, shifting on his feet. I know I already said it, but I just want you to know I'm really sorry for everything. Emily closed the book, hugging it to her chest. She gave a small, almost shy smile. I know, she said quietly. And I think you're trying. That matters. Parker let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. A few days later, the school held another assembly, this time about kindness and accountability. Principal Miller spoke about learning from mistakes and making things right. And in the corner of the gym, Rex sat by Officer Daniels, calm and watchful. When the assembly ended, students slowly filed out, but a group of kids lingered around Rex, asking questions, reaching out to pet him, their faces full of curiosity and admiration. Parker stood back for a moment watching, then taking a breath, he stepped forward and joined them. As he reached out to pet Rex's head, Daniels gave him a nod. One of those nods that says, "You're doing okay, kid." Rex leaned into Parker's touch, and in that moment, Parker felt something shift. Not everything was fixed, but he was learning, and that mattered. Later that day, Emily and Parker sat outside during lunch, a light breeze stirring the leaves around them. Do you think Rex knows how much he helped me? Emily asked suddenly, her voice thoughtful. Parker looked at her, surprised by the question. I don't know, he admitted. But maybe he does. Dogs are smart like that. Emily smiled, her eyes soft. Yeah, I think so too. They sat there for a while, not saying much, just feeling the sun on their faces and the world moving on around them. And in the quiet, Parker thought about how much had changed in such a short time. How a bark, a mistake, and a moment of courage had set off a chain of events that none of them could have predicted. As the school bell rang, kids rushed back inside. But Parker stayed back for a second, watching the sky. He thought about the lessons he'd learned. That an apology only matters if it comes with action, that being brave isn't about being loud or tough. It's about standing up when it counts, even when you're scared. And that sometimes the smallest gestures, like a dog's bark or a quiet word of support, can make the biggest difference. Thank you for sticking with us through this story. We hope it reminded you that everyone makes mistakes, but it's what you do next that really matters. Here's a question for you. Have you ever seen someone do the right thing even when it was hard? Or maybe have you been that person? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories.